I'm Corey Minton, here with your latest edition of Lit News. I'm going to try this in my car, but I'm not sure how it's going to work, because as you'll find out, it's kind of awesome.
What's up? Welcome back to Lit News. It's the latest in tech news, served hot just for you. First up, you saw the news. Apple coming in at $1 trillion market cap. $1 trillion. Now I'll let y'all form your own opinions on the significance of this, or if it's not significant at all, but here's some fun facts for you. Here's how Apple has done over the last 30 years compared to some of the largest businesses you were used to seeing at the top in terms of market cap. Now, when I was growing up, ExxonMobil was the kingpin, and I'm just blown away to see Apple and Microsoft just taking off like ExxonMobil standing still. All right, and here's the latest top 10 list. Important to note here that the top 5 are all tech companies. The first time that's ever happened was in Q4 of just this past year, 2017. And as technology revolutionizes every vertical out there, it's not surprising to see this really. Interestingly, if you look back just 2 years, Apple was worth literally half as much as it is today. And it's been 5 years since Apple wasn't even #1 on the list. And then if you look back a little over 10 years ago when the iPhone first went on sale in 2007, Apple stock has soared over 1,100%. Now what's the real significance of them hitting $1 trillion? One of the biggest things to realize is that the other 4 of those top 5 tech companies are likely going to hit $1 trillion in the near term as well. Interesting side note on this, at the same time, Apple was just replaced as the #2 mobile phone vendor in the world. It was Samsung, Apple, and then Huawei. Huawei has recently jumped Apple, grabbing nearly 16% of the mobile phone market share worldwide, whereas Apple is now at about 12%, Samsung is up around 21%. All right, that's it for Apple. Let's move on to topic 2. Topic 2, so I read this article about San Francisco. They're introducing an ordinance that will prevent cafeterias from being built in new corporate construction. It was so hard for me to read about this without just like, local restaurants, apparently completely unaware of the long-held tradition for tech companies to offer free lunch for their employees, have decided to start restaurants right at the base of these and then wonder why the employees don't come rushing out and they have empty seats for lunch.
And we see thousands of employees in a 2-block radius that don't go out to lunch and don't come out and support our restaurants every day. And that's because they don't have to.
Now, I'm sure it's more complicated than it reads, but it just seems really ridiculous. Now, the executive director of the Golden Gate Restaurant Association was quoted as saying, "You don't really think that people take jobs just for the free food, do you? I think you're underestimating recent college graduates who have just survived off of rice and beans, ramen, and then any extra money that they have left over is just going to beer. So the very good free food that they offer at these companies, it seems like a great deal." And city officials are complaining that tax breaks were given to companies like Twitter, Uber, Square, and they were hoping that these big companies would move in, and then with all these professionals in the area would help spruce up the neighborhood and clean up all the issues. And what they're complaining about is that there's still rampant open drug use on the streets right outside the doors of Twitter, as if it's these employees' responsibility to be out buying things just to clean up the drug use. It's just like, it's not the same thing. I was reading about another city supervisor who was complaining literally, they're all walled in their tech palaces. I'm like, they don't live right there where the building is. Like, are you complaining about that? They get on public transportation, they get to the building, and then they stay in the building all day. The fact that Twitter makes it a nice campus for them to be at and encourages their employees to engage each other over free food, and how can you turn this into a complaint? So in comes a bill that blocks software developers from staying on site, talking to their friends, getting work done. They now have to take the 5-10 minutes to get to their car, drive somewhere, create traffic, create presumably more pollution. I mean, I guess you could argue that they're going to be walking and biking, but I know that they've had electric scooter issues there. And oh man, there's so much to this that I'm like, Anyway, San Francisco friends, I know there's a lot of y'all over there that, well, maybe 3 of you watch this, but let me know what your thoughts are. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Now, maybe it's biased because you're all in the tech industry and you're all probably getting the free food. Whatever. The local gyms are gonna be like, hey, can you pass an ordinance that bans on-site gyms? And the local coffee shops are gonna be like, can you have them shut down all their free coffee machines in there as well? Now, to be clear, I care about homeless and I care about drug users, and like, let's find ways to fix that problem. But how can this be the best way to solve the problem? Anyway, they're looking at passing all this in the upcoming months, and they're about to entitle another 6 million square feet in corporate real estate. So they're trying to pass all this before that stuff gets built, and then new cafeterias get in, and then it becomes worse and worse. And maybe I'm just ignorant on the intricacies of how all this plays out, but please educate me, because right now this just reads as ridiculous. All right, let's move on to topic 3. This next story is a little bit of an inside joke. I saw it and laughed. There's a friend of mine that refuses to turn on the exact specific amount of battery left that's on his phone. I have to have it on. It annoys me if it's just like that gray, like I don't know if I'm at 42% or 53% or whatever. And I'm like, how much battery life do you have left on your phone? And he's like, oh, roughly 70% or roughly 30%. I'm like, why know less when you can know more? It's not like it takes up anyway. Knowledge is power. And in this case, battery power. If you go into Google Maps app, you have the ability to share your exact location with people for a specified amount of time or until you turn it off, etc. And here's a little bit about what it looks like. You can go into Google Maps and you can choose your contacts, share your location with. You can pick as little as 15 minutes all the way up to 3 days, or click until you turn this off. And you can also request their location. But the cool thing that they just added is the fact that when they share their location with you, you actually see not only their location, but their exact battery percentage. So my plan is to hack into his phone and have him share his location with me so I can see his exact battery percentage, and I can add that to my list of things to worry about. No, but it seems like a cool thing, right? Especially like maybe as a parent, you know, when my kids get cell phones, now I have the added information of knowing whether or not they're likely to be unable to have access to their phone because the battery died. Pretty cool. All right, and to close out today, we've got some big data updates and some artificial intelligence from the big data beard himself. That's him right there, ladies and gentlemen. All right, what you got for us, Corey?
So there's some interesting news that's been populated over the last, call it 6 months, about the big data market. The news is basically this, that the IDC analysts say that the big data market is expected to be around $150 billion as of last year. That was the report. And what they're saying is that in 2021, they expect the big data market, total market, to be around $220 billion. That is a lot of money. Big data is still big. People are saying, hey, is big data dead? I would say absolutely not. Big data is not dead. But if you are on any social media, or you read any blogs or any product company's website, AI and machine learning are all the rage. It's the only thing anybody can talk about. But I would argue that AI and machine learning are simply tools for big data. Now, tools for big data, what does that mean? Well, AI and machine learning are just the natural evolution of where big data is going. Big data technologies that came out of the Web 2.0 companies are powering a lot of what we're seeing in AI and machine learning. Now, if you're wondering how big of a deal is machine learning and AI versus big data, let's go back to IDC. IDC actually says that the AI market in 2021, remember, big data was going to be $220 billion. The AI market is only $56 billion. We'll compare that with the big data hardware market alone at $65 billion in 2021. I would argue big data still a bigger deal than AI. So we're talking about AI a lot. Well, at least we know that a lot of people are. But the truth is, AI has a dark side, and our friends at the ACLU are currently taking issue with one particular AI product of current fame called AWS Recognition. AWS Recognition is a facial recognition API that you can use for a fee, obviously, to embed facial recognition technology into your workflow. So imagine you have a video surveillance system and you want to do facial recognition, but you don't have the data science team to build your own facial recognition algorithms. Fine, you can use AWS's Recognition API on both videos and on images. It's pretty rad, don't get me wrong. But the ACLU recently took issue with their Recognition API because when the ACLU ran a quick test using a database of suspected criminal mugshots and compared that to see if they could identify criminals amongst the current sitting U.S. congressmen. So they compared all these mugshots to not the mugshots, but the pictures, the public pictures of current U.S. congressmen. And they misidentified that 28 members of Congress were actually suspected criminals. Now this is my favorite part of this car. Forgive the pause. So AWS and their recognition API misidentified when the ACLU used it 28 U.S. congressmen as potential criminals. Now, this calls into question is should it be allowed, should organizations, especially government, police, or federal agencies, be allowed to use these AI-powered facial recognition technologies for their crime-fighting efforts? And the ACLU says no, because they don't understand well enough how these algorithms work, and they feel that it's in the public's best interest not to have those biases show up in policing. Now, the interesting thing about this particular case was the ACLU actually published that their findings showed that the AWS recognition API actually skewed negatively, meaning poorly, against people of color, meaning it over-identified or misidentified congressmen of color as being potential criminals disproportionately. That's pretty bad, because that's bias. And we all, as we think about ourselves and our own lives, we have biases. But we want to think that an AI and an AI algorithm doesn't have its own biases. But the frank fact is, an AI platform is only as good as its training data. The other interesting story coming out of AI weirdness and some stuff that AI isn't doing so well is IBM's Watson recently got exposed for incorrectly advising treatment plans for cancer patients. Now that stinks. Obviously, doctors are fallible. They make mistakes from time to time. They don't have every bit of experience that we can train into an API, but it brings to light that there are conditions where AI environments can and should be held accountable. So any AI platform, again, is only as good as its training data. But we want to be sure that we can identify those biases early, understand where those biases exist, and avoid those altogether. So the ACLU, amongst all this news, is lobbying strongly that Congress disallow any federal agency or policing agency to use an AI-powered algorithm for facial recognition for crime fighting. Can't say as I blame them, because it kind of stinks. Now, one thing I will say that this identifies is a couple of truths that we know about AI that I think are abundantly clear here. One, AI is only as good as the training data provided to it. Two, anybody that's out marketing an AI solution needs to be held accountable for how that AI works and how that AI makes the decisions that it makes. I think the interesting thing we're finding out too is that any tool, and remember, AI is a tool, any tool in the wrong hands can be a danger to society. Now, AI is just a tool, like we've said, for data science, and frankly, any tool in the wrong hands, used incorrectly, can be a weapon and can be dangerous. These thumbs have been hit by a few hammers, and they would argue strongly that hammers are dangerous and shouldn't be allowed to be used. The backs of these knuckles have been hit by a bunch of wrenches flying free on engine blocks, and these hands would say that anything metal, frankly, is kind of a bad thing, which we know isn't true. So I think all this noise about AI, is it screwing up? Yes, it's going to, because guess what? We live in a perfect world. No data is perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect, clearly. So I think we need to take this with a certain amount of responsibility that, yes, we should understand how these things work. We should seek to have proper controls and governance in place to support AI for good. But I don't think it overshadows the frank fact, which is big data and AI are kind of a big deal. Now, if you're into big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, then I highly recommend you check out bigdatabeard.com or check out our podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. We talk with the industry's movers and shakers, those innovators who are driving technology forward around artificial intelligence and big data. We have a YouTube channel that you can check out. We got some pretty fun videos where we've actually recorded on site at a bunch of the conferences. Now, one thing I'll tell you too is if you want to hang out with us in person, definitely check out the Disney Data Analytics Conference coming up in late August. The Big Data Beard team will be there recording interviews with some of the Very interesting folks at Disney and at some of the attending companies that are driving innovation forward. Has anybody looked at the stock price for Splunk lately? Holy cow, has that thing been on a ride? Splunk is a really interesting company. I'm a big fan of them simply because of the way that they make using machine-generated data so easy for so many organizations and for so many interesting use cases. I mean, machine-generated data is now the fastest growing type of data on the planet. It's outpacing human scale. And Splunk's really emerged as the platform du jour, or really the best platform available in the market for dealing with unstructured, machine-generated, time series type data. And I think the market's starting to realize that they've got a little bit of lightning in the bottle, because there's obviously a number of open source technologies, those that we've talked about from a big data and AI perspective, that can be used for machine-generated data, but the time to development can be so long for organizations to actually figure out, one, hire a data scientist that knows how to do it, hire data engineers, developers, and really with Splunk they get so much just out of the box. Real interesting company. They're getting some ankle biters though. There's some great organizations like Elastic, Logarithm that are really focusing in on areas where they have a unique set of skills and knowledge in a use case, instead of trying to be the one platform to rule them all. This is your Lit Session with Corey Minton, BigDataBeard.com.
Thanks, dude. That's what's up for today. And as always, if you've got something that's on fire, ping me at Aaron Bewley on Twitter so I can fold it into the next episode. Stay lit, fam. Catch you tomorrow.